So for this week, you guys will be working on manipulating strings. We're going to cover the material here today. You guys will have the assignment that is due this week, and you can see that assignment out here on Blackboard. This assignment is going to be the table project, and I'll show you that at the end of chapter 6 here. It's a pretty useful project as a lot of you guys are going to output some data from your midterm projects. It allows you to see it, justified, etc. So we'll work on this and make sure you get that. There's a PowerPoint here that kind of describes working through this assignment, but today we're mostly going to focus on the chapter material. So a lot of you guys have been working with strings. You guys have been doing specific strings, etc. Some of this you already know. So things like having Alice inside of single quotes. This is going to cause a problem when we have things like apostrophes for concatenation or contractions. And so we just put it in double quotes. So we learned that quite a bit early on. We also have the ability to use an escape character. And so we've talked about this briefly, but I want to make sure we enforce it here. The escape character, which is a backslash. Remember, a backslash starts from the upper left and going to the lower right. And you can use that as an escape character for characters after that. So for example, if we keep this in single quotes here, and we use this as an escape character for this single quote, it will escape and therefore keep it inside the string itself. So that can be beneficial if you need to escape specific characters or for some reason you can't do a double quote, etc. What there is very special escape characters. So like we talked about here, you have the single quote, the double quote in here. The /T is going to give you a tab. So if we start playing an idle here, we can see what comes up. So for example, if I have my string equals, this is a tab, I am tabbed. All right, so if we do something like print my string, you'll see what it does is print this text here. The moment it gets to the /T, it's going to tab it over. And so it'll generally fall in the next column. So you'll see this tab space, what's in here, and then it continues on with I am tabbed for this next section. So if I wanted to get multiple things tabbed out, I could do something like this. Let's see here. We're going to change it this way. So if we add another tab in there, you can see that we get tabbed over again. Now, because of the way this one fell, notice that there's more space here or more space in this one than there is in this one. And that's because it goes to the next tab indentation all the way across. So this can be useful if you're displaying information and you want it in a tabular fashion. The /T inside your string will help you take care of that. You can also use /n, which most of you are familiar with, as we talked about this with the print statement. That /n is going to cause a new line break. So if we had something like this my string, and instead of t's, we use /n's. And now we print that string, we'll see that it breaks off into a new line every time it hits one of these. And then last but not least, if you need to have a slash inside of your text for some reason, then you can use a double backslash in order to escape the one after it there. Anybody have any questions over escaping characters? Okay, I know some of you were having this issue when you were working in some other homework assignments. So being able to use single quotes versus double quotes, being able to escape characters that are giving you issues, etc., should be more beneficial. Now you have the ability to also use raw strings, and the benefit of doing things like raw strings is you just put a little R before you start your quotation inside of there. And then from that point on, anything inside of it is taken as a literal. So you no longer need slashes in here or anything else. It's just going to take it as a raw string all the way through here. So it can be beneficial if you have a bunch of things that you would normally have to escape. You can simply just use it as a raw string, and that would be beneficial. We will also use raw strings next week when we talk about regular expressions. So understanding when and where to use raw strings is helpful. All right. So let's say that you want to do something like this letter that we see here with Dear Alice, Eve's cat's been arrested for catnapping, burglary, and extortion. Sincerely, Bob. Well, if we ran this as different strings, then we would have to have a string for Alice, and then we'd have to make sure we get our spacing and our string over here for Eve's, and then we'd have to print all these in order. What we can use when we have multi-line strings, in other words, we have a bunch of text in here, we can use triple quotes in order to follow it exactly the way that we write it on the inside Python. So if we do a triple single quote up here, note there is a difference between triple single quotes and triple double quotes. So for this case, in multi-line strings, we use triple single quotes as they go through here. And then you can write your text as you would want it displayed on the screen, and then do triple single quotes again inside of there. So what does this look like? If we actually look at this inside a script, you could do something like this, but you could say text equals, and then you would have something like this. And so this text string is going to take it literally the way that you type it here. So if I add spacing, if I add tabbing, if I add whatever, it's going to show up just like this. So if I come back and say print text, you'll see that it's going to print it to the screen exactly the way that we had it written up here. Starting with Dear Alice on that first line, starting on the far left-hand side. So this can be beneficial. The reason you guys would see something like this, for those of you that end up doing things like text adventure games in your projects, this can be helpful in order for you to print out big, long strings of text. There's many ways to do that, and we can cover that when we get over to our midterm projects and tips and tricks and stuff like that. For some use cases, having these triple quotes is going to be easier. Notice that when you do triple quotes, things like Eve's cat, where it has the single quote in it, it just prints it out directly on the screen. So it ignores this single quote as long as everything is in triple quotes. Now, triple double quotes is going to be a multi-line comment. So for example, if we come back to our script over here, and you notice at the beginning of every homework assignment, we always have these 3 lines. So you'll remember that having this hashtag up here at the front, or the pound sign, is signifying that this is a line comment. So this entire line is commented out. If we wanted to write something like, what is this project? And again, this is going to come towards your midterm projects. You could do 3 quotes inside of here and say, this is my midterm project. I intend blah, 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 blah. Then you can do triple quotes. The reason you would use triple quotes here is if this is a long section of an explanation, which you will have to do on the midterm project. It's better, instead of having to do each line as its own individual line comment, is that you just block out the entire paragraph that you have typed in here. So if you want to do an entire section of code, again, I can highlight this code down here, come up and do comment out region. Notice how it does line comments for every single line. Another way of doing this is just coming up here before the very top of this, putting 3 quotes in there, 3 quotes down here, and this entire thing is commented out. The reason that this is nice is if you're doing blocks of code and you're testing something in your script, you could obviously comment out all those lines, but if you want to keep them in the format that they are inside of here, you just throw triple doubles at the top and triple doubles below it. Then when you want to activate that code again, we simply take those off and your code is right at its original space. Sometimes it can be confusing if you do a format here and then comment out. Notice how it shifted all the text over. This could cause issues with you adding extra text or white space, etc., into your code later on. So notice how the idle system always uses double pound signs here for line comments. So if you come through and just remove the first one in each one of these, your comment is actually still commented out. So you can come through here and you'd have to come in and remove each one of these if you were doing it manually. Now, if you highlighted all this and you commented it out and then you go to uncomment, it's going to take all those comments out. So again, much easier. If you have a big block of code that isn't working, just come in here, put 3 quotes at the top, 3 quotes after it, and then you can continue on with your code. Anybody have any questions over multi-line comments? Remember, 3 singles is going to be for a literal string so that you can pull this through in multi-line strings. 3 double quotes is going to be for comments. It's typically where people get those mixed up. Okay. So there's lots of things that we can do with strings, and we've kind of referenced this a couple different times. So we've worked with lists, we've worked with dictionaries, but a lot of times what you guys are going to be working with is strings, because that's what you end up printing out to the screen or wanting to manipulate in some form or fashion. We talked about it during lists that you can use indexes and slices on strings just like you would a list. So for example, if we have this string, whoops, wrong one there. There we go. What you can do is slice out pieces of that. So just like you would before with a list, say I wanted to get everything from the 3rd index to the 6th index. So I would have something like 3, 6, right? Now, technically that would be the 3 index, not the 3rd index, to be clear. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3. So we should start at this L and we want to go up to 6, but not include. So we're going to see 4, 5, and 6 being this little space. Remember that when you take a string and you do it literal, that's like putting each one of these characters, even a white space, in its own index all the way through. So if we look at 3 through 6 and then say we want to print that out to see what is in that region, throw that in a print statement. And you'll see that down here, because remember this is after Sincerely Bob, let's give us a couple of spacings here just to see it on the screen a little bit. There we go. And you'll see we get LO, comma, and those are the characters we get. So LO, comma, and then it stops here. Why does it stop there? So we started at 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3 here, this L. Then we're going to go 4, 5, and remember we go up to 6, but not including 6. So that's how we get back that. So this can be nice in order to pull, like, say, the last character off a string. Say you want to remove whatever the last character is, or you're importing data and the last character is always messed up for some reason. You could just remove spam-1 and you could get back that last character. And then you know how to trim that out. Or if you just want the first 5 characters of every string, you could use something like this slice to get the first 5 out of there. Anybody have any questions on treating a string like a list? Now remember, a string is immutable in that case. So what we can't do is come back and say something like, you know, if we had a list, say we had my list here, and we had items inside of that. So something like cat, dog, mouse, like this. And if we wanted to change a index in that list, say we would have something like my list 2, equals rabbit. Remember, this string is going to go through here, or this code that we're going to do is we're going to change the second index, so 0, 1, 2. So we're going to replace mouse with rabbit. And if we run that code, then we would get that. So if we print my list, and before we do that, whoops, we're going to print my list. Okay, so that first time we print the list, we see this. After we made this change, we're going to see rabbit get changed in that placeholder. So we can use things like this in order to change a list because it's mutable. We can adjust things inside of there. But if we did that to something like a string, so remember we had spam up here at the top, we cannot do spam, say 0, say we wanted to change the first character of everything, and then change that to something else. So let's change that to J, right? So if we put the J inside of spam, we should end up with Jello World and not Hello World. And then last but not least, let's print spam again here. Okay, and as you can see, we cannot do item assignment inside of there. It's not mutable where we can adjust things like strings. But what we can do is, like I said, pull out slices. You could do that all you want if you need to slice a portion of the string down. We can also use the in and not in operators in order to find out if something is inside of the string. So if we want to see, let's see if world is inside our string of spam here. We can do something like print world in spam. And if we run that, you're going to see we get back true. So normally we wouldn't print true out to the screen, but what we would do is something like an if statement. So if world in spam, print and now if that is true, it's going to print it's like ragu because it's in there. All right. So you have in, you have not in. You can put strings inside of other strings. So we've dealt with concatenation so far. So if we have something like hello, my name is, and then we concatenate name in there, and we concatenate .I am, and then we can put like a string of an age and stuff like this. You guys are real familiar with doing string concatenation this way. However, this is kind of a pain. And so what you can do is you can use things like string interpolation. And so what this does is you put a %s in here and a %s and a %, and then you put this name. Now, I don't recommend that you do this method because what we want in Python 3.6, in other words, this was a Python 2 way of doing things. In Python 3.6, we want to do something called f strings, and this is much easier to use than it was in the prior way. So what does f strings look like? Well, if we have something like my age equals 35, my name equals Jason, and say we got these from input strings, right? I'm just hard setting them, but if we did inputs and put that through, for example, let's just clean this up a little bit here. So we have my age, and let's just gather this in our input. So we could say input, what is your age? There we go. And then we can say something like my name input, what is your name? Okay. And then we want to combine this in some string later on. So we could have something like print my, and you want to format it out the way you would normally do it. So you would say, you said your name was, and then we would have something like this. then add a period in there. You also said your name, your age was okay. So let's stretch this out a little bit. So today, this is the way you guys have been doing it with just simple string concatenation. And we run this through here and we can see that it's going to prompt us. So we're going to say 44 and we'll put Jason. And then you can see that your name was Jason. You also said your age was 44. Notice that we forgot our period after this. So you would actually have something like period inside of here. So let's run that again. And 44, Jason, and we can see it comes out there. Now, this can be a little complicated in order to get all of this stringed out the way you would want it. So instead of doing it in this complicated fashion, what you can do is throw an F in front of your quotes. Just like we use the R, we're going to use the F. And then now what we can do is format it exactly the way we would want it, just like this. And then where we would want to drop those variables in, we would use our quotes like this, and then you just put in whatever you wanted here. So this variable name that we wanted was my name up here. We would type in my name. And over here where we wanted to display our age, we would put in my age, just like this. So the benefit of doing it in this fashion is we can see exactly what the string is going to look like, and then it will print it out according to this. So we can do run and place that in there. So we say 44 and Jason. Notice how it dumped those variables right into that print string without us having to do the whole string concatenation way. So this can be very nice when you're trying to print out a bunch of variables inside of there, and you can just write this out the way you wanted to. But another way of doing this is going to be something like the single ones that you see here. And you can use the dot format. And then inside dot format, what you're going to do is pass the list of the variables you want. So instead of saying my name here, you would put that here. And then in this one, instead of my age, you would put that here. And what this is your format statement. And so this is going to plug in these variables into these individual spots. So there's pros and benefits of each one. If you know particularly what's going to go into your exact string, then you can just do the F way of doing it, the format way of doing it, or you can use this dot format on your string in order to plug in these variables. So if you had a bunch of these that were going to get spit in there, you may want to do something like this for, and then pass in a list of all these variables. Or if you had a list up above, you could just pass in the list. So if we said something like my list equals, and then we're going to put in my age and my car, my name, sorry. There we go. And then instead of having to list these out, we could just pass the list in. So my list. And if we run this, so 44 and Jason, let's see here. Did I put too many in there? Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, not directly in a list. You need to actually have a tuple in there. So ignore what I just said there. Python 3 keeps changing all these ways of doing things. So again, the one that I would recommend you use the most now, just to keep it easier, is using this F statement that you guys have here. So if we do this, let's see, Control-Shift-Z. You guys could simply do something like this, a simple F in the front, plug these in. Again, inside your squiggly brackets, you're going to list the variable that you want in that particular spot. And you'll notice this is much, much easier than doing all that string concatenation that you did in the past. Because now you don't have to remember to put the spacing the way you want it, or the periods or the punctuation. You just drop in the squiggly bracket, whatever variable you wanted there, in a squiggly bracket. And then the output of that will reflect exactly what you had in here. So for Jason, and it's going to plug that in exactly the way we had it formatted. Anybody have any questions on this? If you had something like age that we're talking about in here, you can also do code inside of there. So for example, if I have my age and I want to add 1 to it, we could put that inside of here so that we don't have to modify it ahead of time. So we have this my age, and we're going to say plus 50 directly inside of it. You said your age plus 50. We're going to say is, and then we'll run this code. Let's see. We need to convert this back to an integer, right? So int. There we go. There you go. So we can see that we can run that code inside these squiggly brackets. We can take in my age, convert it to an integer, add 50 directly in here, and it's going to take this and then print it out accordingly to the screen. So this F string way of doing this is significantly easier than what you guys were having to do in the past. All right. Anybody else have any other questions over these strings and prefixes? Remember, R is going to be for a raw string. That means that you're not going to deal with any escape characters or anything like that. F is going to be for doing interpolation, which means that you want to replace things inside of your string with variables, or you want to run a minor string of code like this, where you can determine an age plus something or something like that. But without that F, you're going to end up seeing exactly this down below. So you must have that F in front. All right, so that's going to bring us into string methods, and there is a lot of string methods that are available to us. Most of these are going to be extremely helpful with what you guys have been working with so far. So the first ones we're going to work with is upper, lower, is upper, and is lower.
I have a question real quick.
And the benefits of these is, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to ask and see if you can like check, are you using like an external mic? Because like the audio quality gets a little bit crummy sometimes.
Oh, that's weird. It should not.
I was thinking it was my headset at first, but I just checked and it wasn't.
Let me know if it drops out again here, or if you may be picking up extra noise that's going on my machine. Because usually this mic I never have any issues with.
Right.
Thank you. Let me know if it is popping. I'll check the recording when we're done and see what's going on.
Will do. Thank you.
So these methods of upper, lower, is upper, and is lower. And the benefit of these is today when you guys get something in, like you ask for this name, right? Or you ask for, let's say type yes or no. Right now, you guys have done if checks to find out what they're getting, right? So you have to do something like if my name, or let's just call this my answer. It'll make a little more sense. My answer equals yes in all lowercase. And then you guys might have another one that says my answer equals yes. And then you may have to have another one that's out there like my answer equals yes. Because remember, depending on what they type, you have to check for every instance of what they could be typing in as a potential answer. So we could do something like print, you typed yes. Right. And so we'd have to check for each one of these instances. And that means we have these really long if checks all the way through here. To make these easier, we can use what's called the dot upper or dot lower method on these. And this is typically where I have people use this. A lot of times I have everybody go to lower. So what it will do is no matter what they typed in on this my answer, all we have to do is put a dot lower, and then we can remove all these other options, because what this is going to do is take in whatever they typed and convert it to lowercase. So if they typed all caps, if they typed it with a capital Y, or if they typed it all lowercase, doesn't matter. We're going to convert all of that to lowercase. And then all we do is have to check against the lowercase version of that. And so if that works, then we can see what they typed in. So if we run this and we ignore this first part, oops, let's try this again here. We could type in capital yes, and you're going to see that we get back you typed in yes, because that took the capital yes, converted it to lowercase all the way across, and then we just have to check against the one. So this will make your if checks a whole lot easier by doing the dot lower. The other part of that is say you're wanting to store these variables for some reason, and you want to make sure that they always type in the correct form, right? So they may type in capitals, they may type in whatever. You may want to just convert that entire thing to lowercase so that when you work with it later, you can use it. So no matter what they can type in, you can convert it to lowercase. The same thing works with upper. So you can do upper, in which case we would want to check this against yes. Now, what you can do, if we wanted to check to see if everything they typed in is uppercase or is lowercase, we could do is lower. And what this would do is basically ask if we wanted it to be true or false, right? And then we could check that. So if we typed in this, we could say print you typed lowercase. And if we typed in all uppercase, notice how nothing spits out, because this is not going to end up being true. If we run it again and typed yes in lowercase, we get back you typed lowercase. Did somebody have a question there? Okay, thought I heard some sound come out there. All right, so again, those are the 4 methods that you can use in order to do much easier checks in your code. You have upper, lower, is upper, and is lower. Extremely beneficial when you're trying to do a bunch of those if or elifs, etc. Every time somebody tries to get an input, I always convert it to lowercase so that you only have one thing to check against. All right. Obviously, when we do this against something like strings with numbers in it, if we do a is lower or is upper, we're always going to return false, because it needs to be ASCII in order for it to check. If you have a combination of letters and numbers inside of here and convert it to is lower, or if you're checking against to make sure that all characters are lowercase, you can do that as well. You can string these together, so to speak. So if we did hello here and do upper, it's going to convert everything to uppercase. If we do hello and convert it all to uppercase and then down to lowercase, you can string these together. We would end up with all lowercase down here. There isn't a lot of times a good reasons to string these together, but you could convert this over with like hello and then convert it all to lowercase and then string together is lower back behind it to make sure that that comes out true. All right, so a couple other methods that we have available, particularly when doing if checks is usually the most beneficial spot for this, is all these is methods. So we can use is alpha, and this will return true if the string only consists of letters and isn't blank. We have alphanumeric or alphanum. This is going to make sure that it has letters and numbers and no blank spaces. Is decimal is only numeric characters and not blank. Is space, and is title. The main one that I want you guys to focus on here is title. So the benefit of this one is it's going to make sure that it starts with an uppercase letter followed by lowercase letters. The reason that we would want to use something like this, if we go back to our example here, is on our isName. If we're storing names, we want to make sure that they're always typing in a name that follows the proper syntax, right? We don't use lowercase characters to describe our name. We want an uppercase character, and then we want it followed by a lowercase character. So if we say, what is your name? And then we come back here and do, what is your name? Space here. We're going to comment this one out for now. And then in this check, we would do something like this in a while statement, right? We learned about this before. To make sure that we're getting the right text from somebody, we would put this inside a while statement. We would say, great, give us your input. And we can say, if my name dot is title, we can print input accepted. Else print okay. So, and then if we wanted to get out of this, remember that we need to throw our break in here to get out of our while loop. So if we do our run here, whoops. What does this look like? So we ask for a name from somebody and we type in Jason. It's going to come back and tell us that's incorrect because I didn't type it with a capital J. So we always have to have a capital letter followed by lowercase characters. If I have JJSON, it's going to tell me that it's incorrect right away. So I must have Jason in order for it to be accepted in here. If you want to have them type, their full name inside of there for some reason, you could have them do this. And again, it's going to check to make sure that it's in the proper quotations here. If I did something like this, it's going to kick them back until they type it incorrectly. So it's a way for you to clean up the codes, particularly when you're asking for input from people as to what you're going to need inside of there. So if you guys are ever asking for names, especially on your midterm projects, I always say make sure you're using this isTitle. And to set it up inside your midterm project, you're going to have something like this little while loop here. So you may print something here where it says that's accepted, or you may just omit this section where you're just going to break and continue on. But if it's wrong, you want to tell them it's wrong and give them an example of how they should be typing it. You could also put that example up here. So you could say EX or whatever you want up here and say Jason. That way they know what's best on the best way to type it. Again, I would prefer not having something in there. I would do this probably in a print statement above. Makes it a little easier to read. So that when you run your program, it looks something like this. What is your name? Example Jason, and then we can type it in down here. And if it's wrong, it's going to loop us back over and tell us what it should be. And then we could say Jason. And then the program would end because it worked correctly. We no longer print out that it was correct. So these little is statements are very helpful when you're trying to make sure that somebody typed in clean code. If you're needing them to type in a string that has just alpha characters and no numbers in it, then you can use is alpha. Again, very beneficial to help clean things up. If you want them to type in something like a phone number, then you would use something like is decimal to make sure that you only get back the numeric characters. If they put dashes or something like that in there, it's going to reject that and only bring in decimals. Also beneficial if you're asking for an age, then you can do an is decimal to make sure that they're only typing in numbers inside of there. So it's doing a check right away. It's kind of like what we used to do when we would try to convert it to an integer. And then if we didn't get an integer, we would accept and return them back and have them do it over again. We can directly just ask right on that string now to find out if is it a decimal. Anybody have any questions over these is methods? Okay, we got about 15 minutes here, actually about 3. So we're going to cover just starts with and ends with. It's exactly what it sounds like. So what you can do on a string, if we wanted to check to make sure that it started with something, we would pass it in like this. So here's our string, hello world. And if we want to check to see if it starts with hello in this proper notation, we just pass it inside the starts with. We would either get true or false. So this is another thing that you can use inside your if statements to find out if something is typed in with something that you wanted it to start with or end with. For example, if you have ends with, and then this one says hello or just a world with an exclamation point, that would be true. But maybe you want to make sure that whatever they typed in always ended with a period. Well, then you'd put a period and do an is ends worth or an ends worth with it and find out whether that's true or false, or an exclamation point. Or say you want to see if it ends with a particular number or something in here, you can use these checks. Okay. Another one that we'll play with is the dot join and dot split. What dot join does, and this is usually a real simple quote. So say I have my list up here that we talked about before. We have my list and equals dog, comma, cat, mouse. And we did there was that practice project that I told you guys to work on where you wanted to put these all together so that it looked something like when it printed, it looked like dog, cat, mouse, and it would actually print this to the screen in this fashion. And so to do this, you would have to have something like my string equals nothing, and then you could do a for loop, right? So for animal in my list, my string dot append, or my string, sorry, plus equals, and then you would have the animal. And then you would also need something in there with like a comma, right? In order to get that. So then we could see what this looks like and print my string. This was one of your earlier practice projects you could work on. So if we run this, we'll ignore this first part here. Notice how we now get cat dog, cat, mouse. And the reason that we're getting that, again, is we start with an empty string. We're going to loop through our little list here, and we're going to add whatever the animal was with a comma and a space. And so that way, when it finally gets to the end of that string, we see something like this. But if we were just wanting a comma separated between here, another way of doing this is doing something like this, where we have a comma, and we're going to do a dot join, and then we could iterate through something. So we could either pass in a list, like what we're going to do is pass our list into here. And we're going to pass this. So what this is going to do is take every item out of this list and then join it together with a comma. And this can be beneficial, like say you want something to be comma separated. Notice how we get dog, cat, mouse all the way through. If we wanted that space in there, we could just put a space and run through. So it's like a shorthand way of doing that whole for loop and adding the string and doing all that. This you can do in a very simple one-liner. So if you want to get everything out of here, say we wanted tab delimited to come out, we would do something like /t. And then if we ran this, notice how we get everything tab delimited down through there. So if we had this one and we have my list 2, 44, 566. Then in order for that to rotate through here, we could get that to where it would tab all the way through and do another list. So we would have something like this. And instead of my list, we're going to print my list 2. Oops, and I got integers in here, right? So let's put these as strings. Otherwise, I'd have to go through and convert all of them. There you go. And so we can see that we can start to build something like a table going across there using something like this with a /t inside of it. But the idea here is using this join. We could also use the dot split, and we're going to talk about that on Wednesday when we come back and talk about the rest of the different methods you can do on strings.